Hello everyone, I'm Cory Mitchell with TradeThatSwing.com, and in this video we're going to talk about letting go. And what that means is basically letting go of our results from prior trades before we move on to the next ones, because if we haven't let that go, it can really affect our performance going forward. You've likely had experiences of revenge trading or being afraid to trade following a loss or maybe even a big win. And that's because we haven't fully let go of what's happened before. So if we haven't let go of it, it's going to affect what's going forward. So it's really important stage of the trading cycle. So we'll get to kind of what the process of a trade is, and then we'll look at specifically that letting go part. So this was one, I wouldn't say this was too charged of an emotional one, but it was a recent loss, and I pretty much got out at the exact top and the exact bottom of this little move. And so I was a little annoyed by it. And so I have this strategy where I can simply just trade based on these lines in high momentum situations, or if there's a pattern that I recognize, I can use that information as well. So basically I took the kind of lazy entry here right at the top. Even though we were getting a potential rounded bottom forming here, we'd made a slightly higher high above this one. And in that situation, you usually get a little bit of a pullback. And this wasn't an explosive situation by any means. So there was not a ton of reason for me to be lazy and just jump right in. A little bit of patience would have done me well. So there was a little bit of a mistake there. Not a huge one, but a little one. And yeah, so I ended up getting in like basically right at the top of that green bar, which was pretty much the high of the move. And then the next few days later, it dropped below that line, which is my signal to get out. It gapped down a little bit the prior day, so I got out that on that open. And yeah, so basically the high and low of that little move. And so letting go is important, because then if another trade develops, you have to be in the right mind frame to get into that. And maybe this one, even though I said it was only a minor annoyance, I didn't really get the entry I would have liked. I again kind of waited for the lazy exit here just based on the this kind of indicator, which is a average true range trailing stops loss. And you can see it just kind of tracks price, and when it drops below, it stays below, and it has to basically flip the average true range, whatever you've set it at, needs to move beyond that in order to move above it. So this one's set at 1.5 ATR, and it's taking a 6-period average. So basically the price would have to move 1.5 average true range away from that average in order to flip the signal. So it gets above there, and I go long again, and it's doing fine. But really, if I would have been on the ball and kind of really let go and been in my neutral, let's call it confident but not arrogant state, I probably would have taken the entrance a little bit earlier, right? Because that would have been more in line with a rounded bottom type pattern that I trade. This had come back a fair ways. Just for my methods and my strategies, this would have been the good entry point, and I just got a little bit lazy on it. So maybe I didn't fully let go of this, and I do remember kind of feeling like a little bit like, oh, do I want to get into this right away again? And just kind of waiting for that, little bit bigger move, which then, if we wait for that bigger confirmation, that generally tends to expand our stop loss a little bit, which then means that could affect our risk reward. So yeah, just a little bit there of annoyance. So let's look at the trading type process. So if we break it down, we have the getting ready phase, which is maybe our pre-trade routine, just getting into the right mindset, maybe going over our trading rules, that kind of thing. So that's an important step before we start taking trades. Then we have our analysis and tracking, which is basically we're honing in, we're looking for our price patterns, things like that. Then when a specific set of conditions occur, we're taking that trade. So that's like our action phase. Then as that trade's ongoing, we have to manage ourselves and the trade. Then we have an outcome, right? We get the result. And this is where things can go a little haywire. And this doesn't get a lot of discussion, right? Because everyone wants to know about tracking trades, analyzing trades, how do you make the trade, what trade should we take. So all the focus is in this middle area of the trading cycle. Not too much focus. You hear a little bit on pre-trade routines, especially if you follow my stuff, but that doesn't get a lot of focus either. And outcomes, everyone wants to know about results, but this very rarely discussed, the letting go. Because this is what allows, if you think of this as like a circle almost, the letting go is what allows us to get back to the top and get ready to trade. And so we get that result, and that tends to throw people for a loop. And it's not just losing trades, because most people think like, oh, like if I have a big loss, maybe I'll take a little bit of time. But it can happen with a big win too. I talk to people all the time who are on a winning streak, and they're really starting to get anxious because it's like when it's weird. If you've never been through that, it's weird. It doesn't really make sense, but you start getting anxious about when it will end, or will you make a big mistake that'll like give all your profits back, or will the market just, it kind of feels like you're in an outlier situation. So it's like, how badly is the market gonna, correct against me to like rectify this outlier that it's already given me? And we're just getting in our own heads, right? There's nothing that says, we can't have a good run or great trades. But if that starts affecting you going forward, you're going to make poor trading decisions, and then it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're afraid that you're going to start losing because you've been on a winning streak, you're probably not going to trade. You're not going to be in the right mind frame. So you're going to start trading poorly, and you're going to have a big drawdown. And that's often what happens because people aren't in the right headspace. So this letting go, after a big loss, of course, it's important too. If you just took a heavy hit in your account, are you really ready to just jump into the next trade, or are you likely going to mess it up again because you're more in that kind of revenge trading mind frame? You aren't really thinking things through. You're trying to make your money back quickly. You're seeing trades you want to be there but aren't necessarily there. Things like that. So it's really important. All these, they're each important, but this one just gets almost no focus. So the question becomes, how do we let go? If we've just had a big loss or we've just had a big win, what's the objective of letting go? To me, it's getting back to neutral. Let's just make this a little bit bigger. So I think of letting go as getting back to neutral. And as we discussed, it's important for all trades, not just losses. After every win, every loss, every break-even trade, every trade, we want to just be doing a little mental cleansing so that we can get back to getting ready for the next one, our analysis and tracking, and not be so affected by the prior trades. How do we know we're being affected? Well, if we're still thinking about it. There was a bit of a clue there on even this like little trade, which wasn't, this was a very small type loss, no huge mistakes. And there was still a little bit of, do I feel like jumping right back into this again? So there was a bit of what I call a charge there, right? You have an emotional charge. You're still, it could be a little sting. It could be you're worried. It could be you're angry. Whatever that kind of emotional charge is, you want to get rid of it before moving on to even getting ready for the next trade. Not even the next trade, but getting ready for the next trade. Because the getting ready part and the analysis and tracking is important before the actual trade. So if you're not in the right headspace, you're likely going to mess those up too. So an example of this is if I haven't let go and I even start doing preparation for my next trades, it's already biased. So I do a pre-trade kind of mental cleansing or pre-trade routine even before I scan for stocks. Why? Because if, let's say, I just had a loss and I'm feeling like I got to make that money back. How do you think that's going to affect my scanning? It's going to affect it a lot, right? I'm going to be writing down a lot more stocks than I do usually because basically I'm looking, I want to find the trade and it might not be there. I'm seeing what I want to see. So by not letting go, I can't even really move on to the getting ready to trade phase. So if you're not at neutral, you basically have to stay at letting go until you feel ready to go to the get ready stage. Getting ready can include some, letting go. If there's maybe just like a little bit of a charge left, you can just remind yourself in your pre-trade routine, like, okay, yeah, we had that big loss or we are on a winning streak, but you know what? I feel pretty good about myself right now. I feel good about my trading. I've processed what I had to go through and, I feel ready to trade. I feel pretty neutral. And today we're just going to follow the plan. This is what I'm going to try to do to support myself along the way. Maybe setting a little alarm clock to just, every 5 minutes kind of clue me in while I'm looking at my charts that, I need to stay on track and not get too caught up in whatever this little emotion I'm feeling. But I'd say 90 to 95% of it has to be in this letting to go phase where you've really reduced that charge if there is one. So how do we do that? Well, I'd say my main process is just sitting there with it, admitting the feeling, admitting man, I really feel shitty about that trade. It doesn't feel good. Maybe it was a really big loss. Maybe you pulled your stop loss or something and you ended up taking a really big hit. So that charge is going to be different. So you might need all of these tactics if it was a really big one, a really big charge. And if it's just a minor one, maybe this kind of first one is just enough. Okay, that sucked. You know what? No one likes losing. But let's move down a little bit here for a second. But maybe, I see my mistake and I'm writing a note to myself to work on it for next time. Or to be aware of it, to remind myself of it. And what's next? Well, you know what? I'm just going to keep following my plan. I made a little mistake here, or maybe it was ignorance or a fluke. Okay, that sucks getting right in at the top and right out at the bottom. But you know what? That's going to happen every once in a while. You're taking thousands of trades in your life. Of course, well, many more than that in my case. Probably hundreds of thousands by now. It's going to happen, right? You're sometimes going to get the perfect entry, and sometimes you're going to get what ends up looking like an awful entry, just based on your strategies, right? Your strategy might, because price can turn at any point. So I'll just kind of rationalize it a little bit, and I'm not letting myself off the hook in any way. I'm just saying, you know what? This is just a losing trade. There was nothing big about it. There was nothing bad about it. Maybe a tiny little mistake on my entry, just being a little bit lazy, not waiting for that little first pullback. But, overall, if I go through this process, I'm going to feel okay and just say, yeah, you know what? Yeah, kind of a shitty situation getting right in at the top. No one likes that. But I think I can move on from it. How am I going to do that? Well, I think back to plan. I don't see anything I need to change here, right? I've made a couple notes to myself about being a little more patient. I can work on that outside of trading. And yeah, what about doing some journaling? If it's kind of bugging you, just write down all your thoughts on what's going on. And then again, it kind of comes back to this. What next? right? So you write down all your thoughts, and maybe they're all just like, oh, I suck at trading. But then what's next, right? Well, okay, well, I have to do what I'm supposed to do, and that's going to be to, follow my strategy. And if your strategy sucks, then you might need to update your trading rules, right? So if you don't believe in your strategy, then you'd have to update your trading rules. But if you do believe in your strategy and this was just a losing trade, then you can remind yourself of that as well. It's like, I've taken thousands of trades, half of them have been losers, half of them have been winners. This was just a losing trade. But overall, because my wins are bigger than my losses, I've made a lot of money. If you're new, maybe you don't have that experience to draw on, but you can still look at your research. You've said, I've just looking through charts, I've seen hundreds of these patterns. And yeah, this one I happened to get stopped out on, but a lot of them are winners as well. And when I added up all the profits and losses, the strategy seems profitable, so I'm going to stick with it. Right, so we're just talking through, we're journaling, we're talking through. You could do a bit of meditating or deep breathing, just, not thinking about the trade so much, just kind of like letting the energy go, focusing just on your breath or something, and yeah, just like relaxing the body, letting it out, and just getting back to that kind of neutral state, right? Because we can do it through our body or our mind. We can kind of preempt. If we make our body really relaxed, then our mind tends to be more relaxed. If our mind relaxes, then we can relax our body. It can kind of go both ways. So just try basically anything. Find what you need to get back to neutral. Sometimes journaling might work. Sometimes just, talking to ourselves might work. Sometimes we might need the meditation. If it was a huge loss, we might need to talk to somebody else, right? And just get some other insights. And so it might vary depending on the severity. It might vary based on the situation. But I would just recommend, before moving to the next trade or even getting ready for the next trades, we let go. Finally, the problem is, just in conclusion, if you don't do that, we already discussed kind of the problem. You can get stuck in a loop where you just go from outcome immediately back to placing trades. And then you have a bad outcome and you go immediately back to placing trades. And you're just stuck in this vicious loop. And you're never taking that time to just sit back and reflect on the results, get back to neutral so that you're in your best possible mind frame for that next trade. If we do that, we're likely to trade very well if we do go through this whole process. But if we skip any one of these, then we are likely to be in for some problems. Happy trading out there.